Tonight, we are not dealing with speculation, propaganda, or social media noise. We are dealing with a confirmed battlefield development, verified, sourced, and deeply consequential. A United States fighter jet has been shot down over Iranian territory. And that single event, stripped of all rhetoric, tells you something very important. This war has entered a new phase. According to verified reporting from Reuters, a U.S. warplane, identified by American officials as an F-15E Strike Eagle, was brought down inside Iran. This is not a rumor. This is not a claim from one side alone. U.S. officials themselves have acknowledged the loss. Now understand what that means. For weeks, the narrative coming out of Washington has been clear. Air superiority, control of the skies, dominance of Iranian defenses. But when a frontline strike aircraft gets shot down in enemy territory, that narrative begins to crack. Because air superiority is not something you declare. It is something you prove every single day in combat. This aircraft was not a drone. It was not expendable. The F-15E Strike Eagle is one of the most advanced and heavily armed fighter platforms in the U.S. arsenal, typically carrying 2 crew members, a pilot and a weapons systems officer. And here's where the story becomes even more serious. Both crew members ejected after the aircraft was hit. One of them, according to multiple reports, has been rescued. The second remains missing. Let that sink in. Right now, somewhere inside Iranian territory, there is potentially a U.S. airman on the ground, injured, hiding, or being hunted. And this is no longer just a military situation. This is a political flashpoint waiting to explode, because Iran has responded in a way that raises the stakes dramatically. Local authorities reportedly called on civilians to help locate the crew, even offering rewards for capturing or killing them. This is not standard wartime language. This is escalation. And when civilians are encouraged to participate in what is effectively a manhunt, the line between military conflict and uncontrolled chaos begins to blur. Now let's pause and fact-check the competing claims, because in war, information itself becomes a weapon. Iranian media initially claimed the aircraft was an F-35, a more advanced stealth jet. U.S. officials, however, have consistently identified it as an F-15E. Independent analysis of wreckage imagery, specifically the tail fin, also supports the F-15E identification. So on this point, the evidence aligns more closely with the U.S. version. But that does not make the situation any less dangerous. In fact, it may make it more revealing. Because if an F-15E, designed for deep strike missions and equipped with sophisticated countermeasures, can be shot down, then Iran's air defense systems are not as degraded as some officials have claimed. U.S. intelligence itself suggests that Iran still retains significant missile and drone capabilities despite weeks of bombardment. So the question becomes unavoidable: has the threat been underestimated? Let's zoom out. This is not happening in isolation. This incident comes after nearly 5 weeks of sustained conflict involving the United States, Israel, and Iran. Thousands have already been killed across the region. Energy markets are unstable, oil prices are rising, and global economic pressure is building. Inside the United States, public support for the war is already weak. Polling suggests that a majority of Americans favor ending the conflict quickly, even if strategic objectives are not fully achieved. Now add this to the equation: a downed jet, a missing pilot, and the possibility of capture or death on foreign soil. Historically, moments like this have triggered massive escalations. When a pilot is captured, it becomes a national issue. When a pilot is killed under controversial circumstances, it becomes a political crisis. And when a rescue mission fails, it can redefine an entire war. So what happens next? The United States now faces a dual challenge. First, locate and recover the missing crew member. Second, do it inside hostile territory, where Iranian forces, and possibly civilians, are actively searching for the same person. This is what military strategists call a combat search and rescue under contested airspace. And it is one of the most dangerous operations any military can attempt. Reports already indicate that U.S. helicopters have been seen flying low over the area, likely part of rescue efforts. There are even claims that local residents fired at those helicopters. If true, that means rescue teams are not just facing military threats, but unpredictable ground resistance. And that complicates everything. Because now, every minute matters. The longer a pilot remains on the ground, the higher the risk of detection, capture, or worse. And here's the strategic dilemma. If the U.S. escalates its rescue operation, deploying more aircraft, more troops, it risks widening the conflict further. If it hesitates, it risks losing a serviceman and facing domestic backlash. This is the kind of decision that defines presidencies. And speaking of leadership, there's another layer here that cannot be ignored. Donald Trump has already issued strong warnings to Iran, including threats targeting infrastructure and critical systems. Now imagine how this incident feeds into that rhetoric. A downed jet, a missing pilot, a public already skeptical of the war. The pressure to respond, decisively, visibly, and forcefully, will be immense. But every escalation carries a cost. Because Iran is not collapsing, it is adapting. Despite heavy bombardment, only a portion of Iran's missile arsenal is confirmed destroyed. A significant percentage remains operational or unaccounted for, and that means retaliation is always on the table. So where does this leave us? Let's strip away the noise. A U.S. fighter jet has been shot down over Iran. 2 crew members ejected, 1 is rescued, 1 remains missing. Iran is actively searching for the crew and has encouraged civilian involvement. The incident challenges claims of uncontested air dominance. The war is expanding, costly, and increasingly unpopular. Everything else, every narrative, every spin, comes after these facts. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Wars are often defined not by the battles you win, but by the moments you lose control. This could be one of those moments. Because when a pilot is alone behind enemy lines, the battlefield becomes personal. It is no longer about strategy maps or press briefings. It is about time, survival, and decisions made in seconds. And for the policymakers watching this unfold, the question is brutally simple. Do you escalate, or do you recalibrate? Because whatever comes next will not just determine the fate of one missing airman, it may determine the trajectory of the entire conflict. Stay with verified facts. Ignore the noise. And understand this. What we are witnessing right now is not just an incident, it is a signal.